Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
And welcome back, everybody. When you've got kids, there are so many different things going on, especially emotions happening, behaviors. It can be a challenge, even more so when your child has some diagnosed challenges. And we're going to look at their behavior and what is actually driving it. What emotion is fueling some of their behavior? A lot of times we just look at what's going on. We might react to it, but we really don't understand what's happening. She does. And she works with families all the time to navigate through some challenging waters. Dr. Michelle Alden joins us once again. How are you?
Good. I'm glad to be here today.
Yeah, it's good to have you back here. And this is one of those things that we take it for granted. You know, the thoughts behind the emotions, we just see the behavior, but we're not really processing what our child is really going through or what they're trying to express, right?
Yeah, it was pretty early in my journey before I was actually even a therapist, but I was definitely a parent and I was working with kids that had autism. And in the training that I was receiving, it talked about behavior is communication and finding out what the child is communicating. And I would say from that point on, like that's been a lot of what I've done as a parent and what I help other parents do is to understand more about what the behavior is communicating and what we can do about it.
You know, that's a great point. And as parents, we don't see that. Your child is communicating. They're trying to tell you something. And we don't see it that way. We just see it as a certain behavior.
Well, and it's challenging because the child's having a behavior, and even if the parent's trying to figure out what's going on, they're asking a lot of questions that the child may not be able to answer. They don't necessarily know what's going on either. You know,
Yeah.
they're not very keyed into knowing how to express what's happening. If they were, they wouldn't be having the meltdown or, being, all the things that we label them, defiant or all those things, because they would
Sure.
have the ability to be able to tell us, in a rational way what's going on. So when we're asking questions like, what do you need? Tell me what you want. I don't understand. It's all kind of, we're coming at them from the front and they're in the back of their brain having these reactions.
Yeah, interesting, because then as a parent, you get frustrated. So then your emotions start getting fueled and it's coming from a good place because you just want to help your kid. They're struggling. There's there's something going on there. It's not, I don't think any of us look at it and say, kids, they're being bad again, or, they're being defiant. They're doing it on purpose. Usually that's not the case.
Yeah. I think that after years, sometimes of dealing with pretty severe behaviors and things, I feel like we do kind of sometimes write those things off. Like, oh, they have this diagnosis, right? Like they're oppositional defiant, or they have ADHD, or they're neurodivergent. That all these things that are labels that don't necessarily tell us what's actually happening. I mean, for me, like I know what all of that entails. And so I can pick through that language and help the parents understand what's happening in their brain and, what's going on for the kids and what they can do about it. But for a lot of parents, it's like the child, whether they've been formally given that label or the parents given them that label, the teachers or whoever it is that's dealing with it day in and day out, it's not always telling us what we can do about it and how to address it.
What's the starting point when you work with somebody, when you work with a family, parent, child, and there's challenges? Well, first, do you see a pattern of the same types of behavior? Do you identify that in order to help them?
Yeah, so usually I find out what's going on in the struggles that the parent's having, and there's a lot of repetitive type things, like this is always happens in the morning, or this always happens at this time. So I kind of look at those patterns, and then I like to apply it to what is also going on in their brain. And so all of those behaviors that are getting those labels tell us how their brain is functioning. And so parents need to know that so that they don't keep addressing it the same way, because with a differently wired kid, you have to come around it a different way. And then I'm working with the parent to change their interactions with their child before I even start working on changing the child's behavior. It's how we're interacting. For example, if you come in and you tell even another adult, that you had a bad day, these are all the things that happened, and you're able to even, express that verbally, the best thing that a person listening can do is, rather than try to go to all the different things that you said that may or may not need to be fixed, but to see the emotion behind it and to identify that emotion behind it. Like, wow, that sounds really hard, or that must have been such a challenge, or I can understand why you're upset. Just trying to see the emotion behind it rather than why are you complaining or whatever it is.
It's not easy. We're not trained. You can look at a situation, and I'm sure most times, if you have enough information, you get a feeling for what's going on there and what a child is going through. But as a parent, maybe it's because we're too deep into it. We're too close to it, and then we have our own emotions of, that's our child. They're struggling, and then it's kind of a give and take in terms of emotions. Can you walk us through the process, Michelle? Like, somebody comes to you, even if you wanted to give an example of type of behavior, even if you identify the age of a hypothetical child in a situation, and walk through the process of treatment.
Yeah. So I work with a lot of different ages, and so I have really parents with really young kids and parents with teenagers, and sometimes the behaviors are really different, and sometimes they're not that different. The teenagers can throw toddler-sized fits.
That's funny. That's actually funny.
Yeah, I've seen kids, stomp around when they're 14, year old tough guys, stomp around. So the first thing I really work on with parents is regulation skills and how to get calm. And also we work a little bit on kind of where the boundaries are and what the structure is in the home. But as far as it's like behaviors that are going on, I try to get parents to stop over explaining and to be willing to kind of sit with some of that emotion for a little bit. And that does take training, and because it isn't natural for us. Like, we are triggered by the things that are going on with our kids, and a lot of times we just want it to stop, or we just want to be able to get dinner made. We don't want to deal with this right now. So I have a family I was working with, and this happened quite a bit, where a child doesn't want to get out of bed. They're old enough to be responsible to have an alarm, but you have a parent that's spending the entire morning getting the child out of bed, going up to their room several times, like every 5 minutes, to try to wake them up, pull the covers off, all of these things. And so it's easy to kind of look at that and just be like, oh, well, they're just so tired, or they need more sleep. And, I'm trying to help them to be in a good mood by waking them up this way, but they're not. By the time it's over, everyone's in a bad mood. Things have been said that you probably didn't want to say, and you didn't want to start your day off that way. So changing the dynamics of how we interact, and looking at, when I watch that in a family, I look for what's behind it in terms of, what is the child getting out of that? Even though they're not consciously thinking like, I'm going to ruin my mom's morning. I don't think that's what they're thinking. But what are they getting out of that? And so this child was actually getting a lot of engagement, and a lot of kids do, when they're having, like, they're either shutting down or having big emotion. They get this engagement from us as the adults that I don't know if it gives them like a dopamine hit or if it just satisfies some need to kind of, it's like they're in control of the situation in a way, even though they're really actually out of control. Um, but it gets the adults trying to figure out how to now control this situation, because in our own humanness and our own sense of what's right and wrong, we want to just say, get out of bed or I'll drag you out of bed, and so we want to take control of it that way. And it's almost like they're feeding off of each other in that, that. And so it's like, I think it's like a magnet. It's like it's drawing the parent to the child, and the child is being like staying in this position because it keeps drawing everybody to him. And so we started, and I've done this with younger kids too, in different ways when they're having tantrums, things like that. I don't recommend just leaving them alone, but we move in closer. Sometimes we're just waiting, but we're being really boring. We're just saying, we can't do this until this happens. But in this case, with the child not coming downstairs and getting ready, we just stop that kind of interaction. And so we're working on just having him get his body to respond when the alarm goes off. So mom goes up in the morning first because he has the alarm set to when he absolutely has to get up. And so he can get up early when mom first wakes him up. And then she goes and does what she needs to do. If he wants to come downstairs and have positive interaction or have breakfast or, any of that, he can do it during that time period. If he wants to just sleep, then he has to get up when the alarm goes off and he has to immediately get ready. Nobody coming up and helping him do that. He doesn't need that help. He's 16, he can do this. And so it's been a real adjustment actually for the parents, even more than for the kid, because the kid, it's like they're going to adjust based on what you're doing. But for the parent, it's like all the thoughts that are behind it, like feeling bad, like, well, I feel bad that now he's going to wake up and I'm not going to be there because he has to, he's only getting up 15 minutes before he has to leave. And usually, and what if he doesn't take his medication and all of these things? So we had to put some things in place for all of that, but also take that off of the mom's shoulders, because he's going to have to learn how to manage this even in these smaller increments where it's safe to do so and get used to doing that. So it involves kind of dealing with the relationship and what you want out of it. If our goal is to have a good morning for everybody to get out the door in time, we can't keep doing this where we're so angry by the time we get out the door,
Isn't it? Everything is, I understand, is a habit. Everything we do in life is a habit. Some are good, some are bad. Is that something that needs to become a learned habit? For example, we'll go basic, even talking about the example of teen kid getting out of bed when the alarm sounds, that has to be ingrained that you're getting up when that alarm sounds. That's how it works. How do you foster that as being a signal? And side note, by the way, my son is now in college. This is his first year. I used to get him out of bed. And when that alarm still goes off for me, when I hear that sound, it just takes me back to, I got to get out of bed to get him out of bed. It's almost like I haven't changed the alarm sound on my phone. So when I set it for myself, I hear the same song and it's almost like a trigger, like,
you gotta go through this battle.
yes, for a second, I'm like in half sleep and I hear the, I'm like, oh, yeah, no. But it's
now
amazing.
You just have you.
Now I just have me, but it's that it almost for a second takes me back to when I would get him out of bed because he just wouldn't get out of bed. It was all good. Sometimes a tiny bit of a struggle, but I had to, I don't know if I enabled him, but he wouldn't get out of bed. So I had to go in there and I had to, it wasn't a lot of work, but I had to take care of it. How do you create that habit? So like turns into an autopilot. The alarm goes off, certain sound. That's when you need to get out of bed. How do you create that?
Yeah, that's interesting because that kind of goes back to what we were talking about in the beginning too, about understanding what's going on behind the behavior.
Mm,
And there's different reasons, right? Like why people might have a hard time getting out of bed. Most of the stuff that you can look up will say, they need more sleep or good, they need an earlier bedtime, all this kind of stuff. But if we put all that aside and just you have a kid that like this kid is actually awake. He's just waiting for all these interactions to happen, But I think that one of the things that we think is like, oh, how do I motivate them? Right. But you said it, and it being a habit. It's really more about teaching and discipline and learning than it is about trying to motivate. And so I think we spent a lot of time as parents thinking we're going to motivate our kids with this lecture or this thought process, or maybe even with a bribe or a threat that's going to somehow motivate them. But if it's not, especially with your neurodiverse kids, like if it's not kind of right here in front of them with what's happening right now, that it looks like a lack of motivation. I mean, I've been told so many times that these kids are, lazy or not motivated or, unable to focus. They don't want anything. It's like, no, I don't think so. The motivation piece has to do with their executive functioning. So if we want to help them function better, we have to build in routine and structure and habits, which takes some discipline. So that's why we're trying to help this person to learn how to hear that alarm for himself, so that his brain does the same thing that your brain does when you hear that alarm. Where
yes.
it's like, oh, that means I have to get up, because I can sleep right through a lot of noises on my phone, on my husband's phone. But when I know that I have an alarm set, I know I have to hear it and get up. So sometimes we put the alarm across the room. Some kids will sleep through it for a while, but we're also making it so like nothing rewarding is happening if you sleep through your alarm. Like, and I think that's part of training our brain too. It's the same thing with people that have trouble sleeping at night. If you get up and you do something that your brain wants to do, even if it's playing, games on your phone or watching TV, you're engaging your brain in a positive way that doesn't send your brain the message that being up at 3 a.m. is boring and you don't want to do that.
That's a really great point. Nothing good is going to happen from sleeping past the alarm. Looking at it that way,
Sure.
can a child process that?
I think that they process it through the action of it. I don't think they process it by telling them, so when you tell them, like, this is what a lot of parents do. If you don't get up, then I'm going to have to keep coming up here, and then I can't get ready, and then I'm going to be late to work. And then if I'm late to work, I'm going to lose my job. And if
but you know what? What I'm hearing is me, my problem, me. What about the child? What about if you flipped it and said, if you sleep late and you miss the bus, then you're going to be late. That'll be another, lateness on your record, blah, 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 blah. So it's more them than it is your situation, your problem.
Yeah, and really it has to be short and concise. Because
Mm,
if we go too far into the future, for a lot of kids
totally.
with executive functioning skills, there's now and not now. So how does this affect them now? It's like, this is that alarm going off is your last warning. If you don't get up, we're all going to be gone. You're going to need to get yourself to school. I will be sending a police officer over at this time to make sure you're okay.
Yeah.
It's very black and white, but it kind of needs to be that for some of these kids to kind of have that jolt of reality of like, it has to
Michelle,
matter
it needs to be that way for all of us. Short and concise. I'm a big proponent of that. I have a friend. We all get together, and when he talks, and he knows it, and he has a great voice, and he's a great guy, but when he talks, he just keeps going, and we say the same word over and over again: laser, laser, meaning laser it out, laser, and he's like, okay. You said the B word before. Let's go to there. Bribe. Is that ever a good thing to bribe?
So I don't like bribes, but I do like incentives. So is your paycheck that you get for working, is that a bribe or is that an incentive?
It's an incentive to continue working.
Right. And so I feel like that's where we kind of have to approach it from. And so a bribe, I feel like, is something we're kind of dangling out there. If you do this, you get this, come follow me, like the carrot with the horse.
Yep.
Where I feel like an incentive is it kind of surrounds the whole thing. Like, and it can even acknowledge, like, you might not like having to get up and go to school, or having, whatever it is you have to do in the morning. But here's why we're doing this. And here's the other piece of it. And I think when kids work for something, it's kind of like, I always tell parents, like, to have work first and then play. We get this done and then this happens. We get this done. So it's an if and then approach, which to me is more kind of building that incentive, which works more internally. We all have our reasons why we do things, even unpleasant things.
I look at the bribe as challenging because if you're going to do an incentive bribe, it's short-lived. It's a one-off. You can't, every single day. If you get up, you'll get, when the alarm goes off, you get up, you'll get this. You can't do that every day. It's a one-off. I guess the incentive could be, it's the weekend. They want to sleep late. There's a family function, somebody's house. They don't want to go. They want to play video games. Yeah, I cut a little bit of slack there too. You had a busy week at school and everything, but we have, it's grandma's birthday. We have to go. Maybe an incentive there because it's a one-off. What are your thoughts overall there?
Yeah, I think it's making it worthwhile for everybody, and realizing that most of the things that we ask kids to do, whether it's chores or, whatever, it is our agenda. And so there's one side of parenting that says, well, then we shouldn't make any demands, that everything should be if they want to, and if they agree to it, and all of that. And I just don't think that's really realistic. That's not exactly how our world operates. And the rest of the world isn't going to just cater to you.
Yeah, well, that's a really great point. You got to be careful there too, because in the real world, we don't get those incentives all the time. Work, it's called a bonus if you're blessed to get one, or that's part of your structure. Yeah, it's very, what I'm getting by and large from you today, Michelle, you really need to be intentional about your communication and your direction with your child. Even something as that seems so benign as going up and waking them out of bed with the alarm. There needs to be a plan in your mind, as opposed to, you need to get up because I'm going to be late and blah, blah, blah. It needs to be planned out. How are you going to approach it? Really?
Yeah. And think about, like, if this happens, then this happens, so, and it can be positive or negative. If you get up, I used to do this with my kids. We lived up in the mountains, and when I would bring them down to school, there was a guy that had this little coffee shop, or, trailer on the part of the way down.
Sure.
And so everyone knew, like, on Tuesdays, if we were all ready to go at the certain, at the right time, then we had time to stop at Darren's coffee house.
Nice.
And they would get hot chocolate or whatever. And that was enough incentive for us to have a good morning, and get ready early. And everyone had to. I had to do it too. So we were all in it. We're all helping each other. Like, what can I do to help so we can go get coffee?
Love that. And you need to be intentional there, because you would have to leave a little bit early to have the time to get the coffee, etc.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's okay. It's like nothing. If we don't make it, it's okay. It's not going to ruin anybody's day. People might be grumpy about it because might have been somebody else that held it all up, but sometimes life just happens and it's like, we're not going to make it today, guys, or I don't have the money to do it today, or whatever it is, so, but that's part of, like, being together on things and creating that. So as much as possible, I try to make it, so it's like, yeah, we're going to go to grandma's house. I know you'd rather come home and I'd rather be at home and not go, but we're going to go do this thing because we love grandma. And when we're done, we're going to stop and get this treat, and we're going to spend the rest of the afternoon just chilling or whatever.
Yep. Need a plan. That's a, but we don't think about this stuff. Again, we're in the trench, the front line. We're right there. We're so deep into it. We don't see it from your perspective and certainly your professional perspective. What's the best way to contact you? If somebody's going through things, challenges with their children, how do we find you? How does that all work?
Yeah, so one thing people can do is go to my YouTube channel, Parenting Challenging Kids, and subscribe to that. They get free information like this all the time.
Sure.
And the other thing is to go to my website, parentingchallengingkids.com, and there's a page that says get started. They can set up a free consultation, and we can, meet and talk about whatever's going on.
Sure. And you can meet virtually like we're talking now, right?
Yep.
I have a visual of being up in the mountains and going for that coffee, and it actually sounds lovely. I'm serious. It really
I
does.
kind of miss it. I miss it.
Yeah, you know what it is for me? It's as I get older, I just want simple life, but just knowing Darren's coffee stand is like a local kind of feel to it, which not really where I am. There's nothing like that. Yeah, you got your Starbucks and things like that. But that just sounds wonderful. I would get up early for that, Michelle.
Yeah. I had one family that did it for McDonald's. Every Monday was really rough. So they just set it up that if they were all out of the house,
Yep.
10 minutes earlier on Monday mornings, they would get something at McDonald's.
Mickey D's is the secret weapon.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for being here today.
You're welcome.
Appreciate it. Good stuff. We'll be right back.
To you.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.